Hi, this is Cathy for Trans by Deaf, and this week we're talking about suicide and the transgender community. To me, this is probably the most difficult subject for me to address as a transgender person. The reason why it is so difficult for me to address is because of my background. When I had an attempt to transition at age 8 and again at age 12, at age 12, I considered taking my life just like Leah did and was successful at doing a few weeks back. That really brought this to the head in the transgender community. I realized that the only thing that really prevented me from committing suicide at age 13 or 14, when my mother took me to a counselor who was very religious based, and he tried to convince me that I was a man rather than a woman, was the vision of me seeing my mother crying when I was found dead. I considered going to a high cliff not far from my home and jumping off that high cliff, and I always could see my mother being so sad, and my poor old Labrador dog being sad as well. And that was probably the biggest thing that kept me from committing suicide, was knowing that my mother loved and cared for me. One of the most important points about suicide is that everybody who attempts it feels like no one in the whole world cares. That's why it is so important to have friends and family that are supportive of your transition and will help you go through. I believe that one of the biggest problems with our community is that when we tell people that we are transitioning from one gender to another, or in my case, from a man to a woman, the people around you abandon you and leave you, and you feel so alone and feel like no one cares, or you get depressed because someone will stop you from progression. I'm sure that's what happened to Leah that really caused her suicide, was that her parents and family made her feel as though no one really was interested in how she felt. It was all in the image of the family. Having been there with my family at age 14, I can understand the intense feelings of depression that I went through, and I felt that the counselor that my mother took me to, even though he had the right motive as far as he was concerned in mind, he was not willing to listen to me and listen to my feelings. And there were lots of times that I was very blue and very dark at that point in my life. I also went through another bout with that same thing at about 24 or 25, when I tried to transition and only lasted a few weeks before I went back to being a man. And at that point in time, I ended up seeing the same counselor and having him convince me that the people around me did not want to see me transition, and it was not in my best interest. I really believe that idea of going to a counselor who is opposed to transition, who does not understand it, can be one of the gravest mistakes that someone who is trying to get help for a transgender can do. I believe that it, in my case, made me more depressed and nearly drove me across that threshold of suicide. I realized when I got to be in my late 50s and transitioned this last time to become the woman that I am now, that if I had continued living as a man, doing things as a man, I would have committed suicide as well. But I had had enough counseling and had talked to enough people, and maybe was a lot more mature at that point in time, that I realized the only one that would possibly leave me would be my wife and daughter, and the rest of the people didn't really matter. And when my wife showed that she would support me, I was elated, and I have appreciated my wife's support for the entire time since I transitioned, and I would hope that she would know how much I love her for that act of kindness and for staying with me. I also appreciate my daughter's love and kindness, and I think family support is the most important thing in preventing suicide and helping you to uh, adjust and to rethink the concepts and ideas that are associated with you changing gender. It is not an easy thing for you, but if you are constantly told that you're wrong, that God doesn't love you, that God doesn't make mistakes, and I've heard all of those, it tends to cause the depression level to go extremely high. Well, that's what I have to say about transgendered issues and suicide. Let me emphasize that I think the most important thing in preventing suicide with us as trans, and what kept me going the most, was the support of my family, my mother and my brother when I was younger, and my wife and daughter now that I'm older. That can do more to prevent suicide than anything else. Please, let me beg you, do not find a religious-based counselor and try to have them make you stay the gender, or make that person stay the gender that you aren't, and be so miserable and so depressed. Having been there, that's one of the worst things in the whole world. Well, I hope that we have a brighter topic next week, and I will see you again next week. If you have a comment, please leave it in the box below. Thank you, and bye.